But welcome to Malvern Books, everyone. Thank you all so much for coming to these short stories by Texas authors reading. We're really glad to have you. After the reading, please feel free to hang out, enjoy some refreshments, buy some of the authors' books, which are over on this table. I'm sure they'd be happy to sign them for you. And we'll be around to answer any questions. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce the head of the Texas Association of Authors, Alan Bourgeois.
Thank you and welcome. We appreciate you attending. We have 3 readings at this moment. We're still waiting on one more person. He was driving from California, so he may be a little late. The readings will be done. We'll take a short break, let you have a chance to talk to the author, ask them any questions about what they've written, and then we'll go on to the next ones, and I'll introduce each one. Real quickly, our Super Reader is a new program that we've launched. If you have not already taken a picture, we encourage you to do so. Then tweet and post about it and enter for a chance to win $100 in books on our website. We have over 700 titles representing close to 200 authors, so there's plenty for you to choose from. I know we have something for everybody. In the meantime, I would like to introduce our first reader. Her name is Diana Finfrock Farrar. I know I always say that wrong, so I apologize if there's any errors. But she's going to start, and Diana, welcome aboard.
Thank you. Thank you for being here today on this kind of dreary day. It's a nice place to be in the middle of a bookstore. I'm going to share with you a short story that I wrote probably about 10 or 12 years ago. I can't really put my finger on the exact date. It's called One Scoop or Two. Mercifully, 2 of the nurses escorted them out a back door and down the long hallway which led to the parking garage. It had taken a long time, too long, to get everything settled there. She didn't remember most of the drive back to her mother's, but here they were, looking at a house that had been home for over 40 years, which now seemed utterly and completely unfamiliar. Her childhood had been filled with many hours of neighborhood play on this street. Mama helped the girls organize lemonade stands and bake sales. The boys' favorites had been kick the can, stoplight, and baseball. They all played in the vacant lot across the street where Daddy had often been the designated pitcher, and he would announce each batter with exaggerated stats. Kevin and the Harper boys usually dominated in the games, requiring athletic ability, but she and the other girls ruled when it came to good old-fashioned house, nurse, and war, all neighborhood staples as well. The boys would fight and the girls would treat them, but prescribing a pleasant treatment and dispensing an encouraging prognosis usually depended upon whether the patient was your brother or not. Their medications had been M&Ms and Kool-Aid, old Ace bandages and Telfa pads dressed every wound. How easy it had been back then to create an awful injury or disease and then cure the patient all well before dinner time. If only those old childhood rules could apply to her adult world now. As the women walked into the house, Carmen looked at her mother and extended her arms. She wished she could relieve her mother of this unbearable heartache. This beloved person, wrapped in her arms, needed all the reassurance she could provide. But even at a time like this, Carmen still received a source of comfort and strength from her mother's embrace. Could Mama feel any of the same from her? Honey, I don't know if I can stay here by myself. Carmen drew her mother in closer. She would be lost without him. Carmen knew this. Mama's generation had built their lives upon husband and household. She was the proverbial good wife who had raised the kids, cooked dinner every night, and did everyone's laundry. She would willingly drop whatever she was doing to cook, wash, or mend something at a moment's notice, which was usually all she ever got. Carmen shuddered to think how many times Mama had prepared 3 separate meals to accommodate a football practice, drill team, or a late night at the office. Surprisingly, she had never seemed disturbed by any of it. Thank God that part of her life had not mirrored her mother's. Kevin had arrived at the house much earlier, and he found them in the den. I thought I heard the garage door. He gave a quick kiss to Carmen, then put his arms around Mama. You okay? Kev was now the head of the family, the one to whom Mama would look for help and advice. Unlike their other siblings, he had shared a physical resemblance to Daddy. and had also inherited his athleticism, but their temperaments were very different. Where Daddy's personality had been more playful and outgoing, Kev was more serious and shy. He looked awkward in his new role, but admirable just the same. Mama kissed his cheek and then held his face in her hands. He swallowed hard. Just then, Jared skipped out of the kitchen, leaving the door swinging in his wake. He was only 5, but being the youngest of 4, he had already learned that assertiveness and self-assurance served him well. His strawberry blonde head was a blur as he twirled around his father and then his grandmother. He was happy as he could be, oblivious to the veil of sadness which cloaked their hearts. He had a splotch of something on his cheek and around his lips. "Grandma, Daddy's getting me something to eat. What flavor ice cream do you want?" "Oh, honey, I don't have a favorite." And she hesitated. "I'll have the same as you." "Well, mine's chocolate. That's my favorite. Want it to be your favorite, too?" His sticky fingers grabbed her wrinkled hands as he pulled her toward the kitchen. Kevin started to reach for Jared to intercept this capture of their grieving mother, but Carmen held him back. "How about sprinkles? You've got to have sprinkles on chocolate." "Whatever you say, baby." They disappeared through the swinging doors, Jared chattering all the way. "Let her go, Kev. Jared may be just the distraction she needs right now." "So how is she?" he asked. He couldn't hold Carmen's gaze. He had to look toward the kitchen doors instead. He was still gripping the ice cream scoop and was repeatedly tapping it into the palm of his free hand. "She doesn't know what to do with herself. Daddy!" Jared called from the other room. "We need the spoon. Do you have the spoon?" "I'll take care of it," Carmen said, and she took the scoop from Kevin's hand. "Why don't you go get Daddy's things? I didn't have the heart to bring them in with her just now. They're still in the car." Mama and Jared were sitting by the window in the kitchen. She was short and petite with silver hair. It had once been the same color as Jared's. She had the enthusiasm and energy of 10 people, but since Daddy had gotten sick, she had shrunken somewhat. She had become invisible, transparent, an apparition of her former self. Carmen watched them as Mama listened to another one of Jared's unending stories. His eyes sparkled and his spirit literally danced under the umbrella of his grandmother's unconditional love. She truly loved her grandchildren. Even today, as awful as it was, she would be devoted to those she held most dear. It was easy to see the value she placed on each of them as individuals, and they all knew it. They felt it. They reveled in it. "I like whipped cream and nuts, too, but we don't have any of those." She leaned in close to him and brushed the hair off his forehead as she spoke. "Well, sweetie, I'll remember to get some Cool Whip and pecans for you next time I go to the grocer's." That was classic Mom, thinking of others even now. Carmen held up the scoop for her mother to see. "Mama, do you want 1 scoop or 2? Her mother seemed very far away, and she had a look in her eyes that Carmen had never seen before. Mama didn't answer, but she merely shook her head at Carmen as if asking a question. This had appeared to be a decision requiring some monumental consideration on her part. She seemed genuinely disturbed by the fact that she didn't really know what it was she wanted. "I've got 3 scoops, Auntie Carr." Jared's chin dripped with chocolate as he shoveled the ice cream into his mouth. Kevin and Jared went home when one of the neighbors had dropped off a casserole and homemade cookies. For most of the meal, Carmen and her mother ate in a comfortable silence. The 2 women were close. With the exception of a few tumultuous teen years, their relationship had been a good one. Today, their mutual silence was as much a conversation as anything they could have spoken to each other. They served, ate, and cleared the dishes in a silent dance, each one anticipating the needs of the other. They moved to the music of their hearts, however broken and unsure. Each one flowed naturally with the other, knowing each move, gesture, and expression. Carmen gazed out the window as she removed the lid from the cookie tin. It had grown dark outside. She could hear the high school band playing in the distance. It was Friday night. She loved Friday nights as a child. Football on Friday had been as sacred as church on Sunday. The cheerleaders, the music, the letter jackets, the moms, her parents never missed one of the boys' games. Carmen closed the refrigerator door, the cold milk in hand. She missed those carefree days. Mama got 2 glasses out of the cabinet, but then she just stood there, and she held them against her body instead of bringing them to the table. Carmen could see she was deep in thought and was now struggling to find just the right words. Honey, earlier, when Jared asked me what my favorite ice cream was, it wasn't that I didn't want to have a bowl with him, but I honestly couldn't tell him what my favorite was. She hesitated and then continued. I knew your father's favorite, and I could probably name what each of you kids would prefer too. But as for myself, I haven't a clue. She sat down and she placed the glasses on the table for Carmen to fill. Oh, Mama. Carmen placed her hand on her mother's stooped shoulders. Today with Jared, I realized that I was grieving another loss, personally one even more frightening. I don't know who I am anymore. She had to look away as she continued. I caught a glance of myself in the mirror this afternoon, and I saw a stranger looking back at me. I'm afraid, Carmen. And she told Carmen of past hopes and dreams. She had a love of the arts, but especially painting. I wanted to see the world and then be able to remember it all with a palette and a brush. Mama had called them canvas moments, those special times and places that most people immortalize with a camera. She even had fantasies of a future in a museum as an art broker or a critic. Carmen had never heard her mother open up like this before. As close as they had been, she now realized that Mama rarely talked about herself. Carmen reached for another cookie. Mama hadn't touched hers. Although Mama's memories were now flowing like a strong, steady river, her voice still faltered occasionally as she spoke. She paused frequently as she described many of the dances she and her friends went to with the airmen stationed at Key Field. Carmen wondered if she was remembering their faces or perhaps hearing their voices. Most of them were nothing but flyboys, but one had been a dreamboat, namely Daddy. Her hands trembled as she fingered her wedding band. Mama was uncomfortable, and she continued to look down at the table between thoughts. She had let her own dreams take a back seat when she fell in love with Daddy. Being a wife and mother had been enough, but now she was feeling empty, feeling poured out. You know, Mama, I understand what you're saying, even more than you realize, in fact. And then Carmen shared some of the same feelings, although they stemmed from different circumstances. I've been stretched so far. Between work, Michael, and the kids, I don't have any time to call my own anymore. She told her mother how difficult it had been to juggle the stresses of a successful career with the guilt of not being home when the kids were little. And Carmen knew firsthand the benefits of having a stay-at-home mom, and knowing just what her kids were missing made her balancing act even more difficult. And with Michael's business trips becoming more frequent since his promotion a few years ago, Mama, sometimes I just want to scream. The fact that her father's lengthy decline had left her drained was left unspoken. And now, with Mama all by herself, there didn't seem to be an end to Carmen's own heartache. Yes, she was empty and poured out too. You know, honey, Mama said, I wouldn't change a thing about our family, and I don't want you to feel that you should change anything about yours. I'm so proud of who you are, at work and at home, and you should be too. She had been looking Carmen in the eye, but now she looked away. But you see, this afternoon, with Jared's seemingly simple question, I realized that I had been so busy being a wife and a mother over the years that I've just forgotten who I was without that. Oh, dear Mama. Carmen could see that she didn't know how to trust herself or her feelings, and that troubled Carmen. Had she, Daddy, and the boys helped create their mother's current situation by being so willing to receive her gifts of self? Mama's worth was tethered to the happiness of those around her. How in the world would Mama make the rest of life's journey on her own? They finally finished the cookies as they resumed their silence, listening as outside the band celebrated another touchdown. Mama lived another 15 years after Daddy passed away. in the months after his death, she returned to some of the activities she had put on hold during his illness. Church activities, neighborhood associations, visits to all the grandkids' universities, but Mama had also embarked on new interests. She volunteered at the hospital. She began to travel with some friends, and she once again picked up her paintbrush, dabbling in oils and watercolors. Although her renderings weren't museum quality, she did have several canvases hanging in the den depicting scenes from her Widow Women's Travel Club adventures. One painting, a sunset on Maui, actually hangs in the volunteers' break room at the medical center. But the one most dear to Mama's heart was the portrait she had painted of Daddy in his leather flight jacket at the age of 24. Leaning on the door frame, Carmen stood in the doorway of her mother's bedroom. She could still smell Mama's familiar scent in here. She looked around and spotted her Avon night cream on the dressing table. That moisturizer would always be a bittersweet reminder of the memories too raw to feel today. It was just too soon. Carmen had been lost in all the old family photos and knickknacks, which covered the bureau when she saw it. It was her mother's keeping box. It was there on the nightstand. It was nothing but an old cigar box that one of the boys had decorated long ago with all sorts of buttons of different sizes, shapes, and colors. Whichever brother had fashioned the box had given it to her for a birthday present long, long ago. Carmen caressed this special box of treasures, and then she opened it gingerly. There was an old snapshot of her mother as a small child, being cradled by Grandma Rosie. There was one of Mama and Daddy on their 25th, and there were several other pictures of women she didn't recognize, probably that travel club. There were invitations to each of their weddings, some birth announcements, a few old letters and postcards, and a homemade Mother's Day card for Grandma by Celeste, dated 1982. A paintbrush, Daddy's obit, and some rose petals were also in there. But on top, Carmen had found a neatly folded slip of paper written in a script that she recognized to be that of her mother in her later years. Carmen's eyes filled. She cradled that little slip of paper in both hands and brought it close against her heart. All it said was, mint chocolate chip and cherry cordial, but there's nothing like a hot fudge sundae the way Jared makes it. And through her tears, Carmen said aloud to the walls, God bless you, Mom, and thank you for teaching me never to forget me and mine.
Does anyone have any questions for
Oh,
Diane?